Starting off our list at number 10 is Katherine Heigl. We gotta be honest here and say there's probably a few interviews that affected her career, but one back in 2008 pretty much landed her on Hollywood's blacklist. She took the lead in the 2006 movie Knocked Up, and the movie, as well as her performance, was well received. Apparently not by the actress herself though, who opened up about how she felt about the movie later on in 2008. In the January issue of Vanity Fair, she said the movie was, I quote, "a little sexist. It paints women as shrews, as humorless and uptight, and it paints the men as lovable, goofy, fun-loving guys. It exaggerated the characters, and I had a hard time with it some days. Why is this how you're portraying women?" This interview alone was enough for people in Hollywood to turn away from wanting to work with her, but it was sealed when she did another interview in 2008 where she dissed the writing in her show Grey's Anatomy. The actress has to figure out a way to either keep her mouth shut or just choose her words wisely.
I'm not a rude person. I'm not an unkind or mean person. I would never go out of my way or consciously try to hurt anyone's feelings or make them feel bad or uncomfortable or not be professional and do my job. I like my job.
And at number 9 is Paula Abdul. Back in January 2007, the American Idol judge did an interview that went viral instantly. Throughout the video, which happened to be filmed, she slurred her words, wobbled, swayed, and spoke a bunch of nonsense, basically. News anchors from Q13 Fox News Live streamed Paula from New York to do a live interview with her, but because of how she was acting, they thought there was some sort of connection issue.
Oh, I don't know if she can hear us right now.
They kept saying there must be a problem and that she can't hear them properly, but that wasn't really the case at all. Even when she did respond to their questions, she was acting like she was highly intoxicated. She was closing her eyes, slurring her words, just acting kind of all manic and weird. Later she tried to explain, saying there was a connection error at first and they had a station from Alabama in her ear along with the Fox News at the same time. But once they fixed it, she blamed the rest of the erratic behavior on just being tired. She said fatigue and exhaustion just added to the whole thing, looking so disoriented. But no alcohol and no drugs. Absolutely no. The interview had a huge effect on her career. 2 years later, she wasn't able to land another contract with American Idol. The world didn't see much of her for years until she snagged a judging role on So You Think You Can Dance. However, her career just hasn't been the same ever since. Sliding into the number 8 spot on our list is 5 Seconds of Summer. Back in 2015, the band managed to alienate both their fans and a lot of fellow artists and celebrities in just one interview, and since then the world hasn't heard much of them since. In December 2015, their interview with Rolling Stone left people really pissed off. Michael Clifford, who admitted during the interview that he was hungover, bashed the American Music Awards, which they performed at the night before. He said the show was compromised and had, I quote, "a lot of fake people." He also called out Justin Bieber and said he thinks he hates them, for no apparent reason at all. Luke Hemmings from the band left fans and parents feeling disgusted after saying, "When you put 4 young dudes on a tour bus playing theaters then arenas, you're going to have sex with a lot of girls, I guess. We had a good time." The interviewer awkwardly joked back, asking if they slept with multiple girls in one night or at the same time, and he responded with, "I feel like I shouldn't say. You can say the possibility of that is high." People were pretty repulsed by their interview, and things just haven't been the same for their stardom since that day. Next up at number 7 is R. Kelly. He did some major damage for his career back in 2008 when he made comments about being with underage girls. But this interview came after he went to trial for being accused of child pornography. Kelly was accused of making a 27-minute sex tape with an underage female, but after going to trial, the jury declared him not guilty on all 14 counts. People were all feeling some type of way about him, some believed him and some didn't. But his interview after the trial didn't help paint a very good self-portrait. During an interview with BET, he was straight up asked, "Do you like teenage girls?" After everything that went on with court, you would think his response would be an immediate no. However, he responded by saying, "When you say teenage, how young are we talking?" He went on to say that he has some 19-year-old female friends, but none that are technically illegal. After the interview was aired on BET, Kelly's team saw it and demanded that it never be shown again. It was already too late though, the damage had already been done.
This is not me, y'all. I'm fighting for my life. Y'all killing me with this. I gave y'all 30 years of my
And at number 6 is Miles Teller. The actor had a promising career, especially after his role in Whiplash back in 2014. But it was after an interview in 2015 where his career took a hit and began to stall. In August 2015, he did an interview with Esquire, and he thought it would be appropriate to tell the female writer and their waitress that the bar glass was modeled after his private parts. He obviously used a much more vulgar term, but I'm definitely not going to repeat it. He was pretty sassy too, trying to demand the writer to cut his meat for him when their food came. The interview didn't paint the actor in a very positive light and says that things were changed around. After receiving tons of backlash from it, he told Vulture, I quote, "If how that story made me look was how I really was, I'd think I was the biggest douchebag too. I know who I am, and it's not who I was in that story." Since then, he hasn't been able to book movies like he used to and has only about 6 credits to his IMDb in the last 4 years. Some of you might not even heard of any of them. Halfway through the list at number 5 is the Chainsmokers, another time when a band tried a little too hard to be edgy and just came off as super lame instead. Back in 2016, Billboard did a cover story on the band where they said things that people weren't too thrilled about. Andrew Taggart told the magazine, I quote, "We rage every night. My mom's going to hate reading that, but she already knows." But his DJ partner Alex Pal said that they were pros, saying, "But you'll never see us getting carried out of a club. We're way too good at drinking." Both band members continued on with the interview and thought it was appropriate to bring up their groupies, even though they both had live-in girlfriends at the time. Alex said even before success was number 1. And then Andrew chimed in saying, "Like, why am I trying to make all this money? I wanted to hook up with hotter girls. I had to date a model. We're just frat bro dudes, you know what I mean? Loving ladies and stuff." And drum roll please for the worst part of the entire interview, the boys also revealed the size of their private, saying that they measured from tip to tip. Classy. Here we are at number 4 with Gary Coleman. The actor sadly passed away at just 42 years old, so this is in no way to disrespect him, but to share what happened leading up to his very controversial death. The actor always had medical issues, but often didn't like to speak on them. On May 26, 2010, the actor fell down the stairs while at home with his wife and had to go to the hospital after cracking his head. He was treated, but the next day he went unconscious and landed on life support, where he died on May 28th. People were suspicious as to what actually happened, and rumors began to fly saying that his wife had actually pushed him down the stairs. Now, the only reason that they thought this was because they went to court after she accused him of physically abusing her. The couple was always known for their altercations and even appeared on the show Divorce Court. This is what led to Gary having an interview that impacted his career in a very negative way. One of the female hosts on The Insider asked him if he abuses his wife, and when he wouldn't flat out deny it, she begins to question if it's true or not, and that's basically when he lost it. He ended up saying to her, I quote, "Go F yourself. I don't know you, I don't care about you, your life doesn't matter to me. If you get hit by a bus tonight, I'm not going to care."
There is no abuse that goes on in my house. Now, if people believe that I'm waffling, then they can go do what they need to do.
Did you abuse your wife? Did you abuse her? Did you lay your hand on her?
And you know what? You can go the same place.
Then he storms off the set and tells all of the hosts to go themselves. People were stunned by his anger and reaction, and he wasn't very well received after that. Alright guys, at number 3 is Megan Fox. It is no surprise to anyone anymore that her career started to fizzle away after the Transformers incident when she publicly bashed the director. In 2009, Fox told Wonderland that the director of the film series, Michael Bay, is, I quote, "like Napoleon, and he wants to create this insane, infamous madman reputation. He wants to be like Hitler on his sets, and he is." She went on to call him a nightmare to work with and said that he has no skills at all. As a result from her interview remarks, she was fired from Transformers Dark Side of the Moon and was only booking smaller roles and cameos. It wasn't until she later apologized to Bay that she was allowed back in the director's blockbuster movies, which is how she got to start in his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle franchise. However, Bay told GQ it was actually Steven Spielberg who demanded that he hire Fox, and added that she may not have been the most professional actress on set. I thought Michael Bay was someone you don't want to be on bad terms with, but if the real issue is Steven Spielberg, that's even worse. And at number 2 is Charlie Sheen. He has a list of things that all play a factor on why his career came to an end. One of them was his ridiculous and totally inappropriate behavior during his interview with ABC when he confessed to still being on drugs. Actually, when he asked if he still uses drugs, his exact response was, "I am on a drug. It's called Charlie Sheen. It is not available. If you try it once, you will die. Your face will melt off and your children will weep over your exploded body." He went on to talk about sleeping with prostitutes and said that they are the best at what they do and has no problem admitting that part of his sex life. The entire interview is manic and whack, but no one could ever forget his famous line when asked about how he survived his huge drug binges. He responded with, "I have tiger blood in my veins." Since then, it's been an ongoing joke, along with his career. However, rumor has it that he has sobered up and it's possible he will be making a comeback. Taking the number 1 spot on our list is Reid, only because it was so shocking. The sweet blonde shocked the world after showing up drunk to an interview, or so it appeared. Back in August 2018, she did an interview with Today Extra on Australia's Channel 9 to promote her movie The Last Sharknado. But throughout the interview, she was slurring her words, spoke very quietly, and often just trailed off. When you watch it, there's moments when you feel like she might actually fall asleep.
It really makes sense from the first one. It really does it makes a complete circle. And
after the interview, rumors started that she was drinking again, which was a problem from her past. She released a statement afterwards, not giving any kind of reasoning for her weird behavior, but insisted that people have no reason to worry about her health. However, people were still very much worried.
In at number 10, Megan Fox. If you want to keep your job, it's probably best not to compare your boss to Hitler. During a 2009 interview with Wonderland, actress Megan Fox did just this while describing her boss, the Transformers director Michael Bay. Not only did this result in her immediate firing from Transformers Dark Side of the Moon, it also led to the actress being blacklisted in Hollywood for the next few years until she apologized to Mr. Bay. Upon reflecting on her being kicked out of the Transformers franchise, Megan told Cosmopolitan magazine that this was absolutely a low point in her career, but without saying what she said, she wouldn't have learned as quickly as she did. She knew that in order to get her career back, all she had to do was apologize, but she still refused. Fox blames her attitude on being very self-righteous at 23 and not being able to see that this was for the greater good. Probably the greater good of her bank account, I'm imagining. In at number 9, Katherine Heigl. Katherine Heigl seems to be the type of celebrity that just says yes to every opportunity, and then when she regrets it later, she just openly bashes her decisions in the public eye. The main example of this happening was when she co-starred opposite Seth Rogen for the Judd Apatow film called Knocked Up. When Seth Rogen was asked about this, he said that Katherine and him had a great time while working, but mainly because she was improvising a lot of her own stuff, which was overall great for the film. However, not too long after that, she did an interview with Vanity Fair and expressed just how much she hated the entire movie. Heigl said, "It was a little sexist. It paints the women as shrews, as humorless and uptight, and it paints the men as lovable, goofy, fun-loving guys. It exaggerated the characters and I had a hard time with it. On some days I'm playing such a why is she being such a killjoy? Why is this how you're portraying women? 98% of the time it was an amazing experience, but it was hard for me to love the movie." Well, Katherine, now it's hard for anyone to really trust you being in their movie, especially after an interview like that.
She had some commentary about Knocked Up after it came out.
What'd she say?
She didn't like it.
She didn't like it?
But she was so awesome in it, so it was
Right.
confusing.
In number 8, Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen is the exact polar opposite of what you should do when pursuing a career in Hollywood. He carries with him a terrible offset and onset reputation, and the debacle that he went through in 2011 even led to his contract termination from the show 2.5 Men. For a while, he was all over the news for everything: substance abuse, domestic violence, and even when he revealed that he was HIV positive. With his history of flying off the drop of a hat and trying to get people fired who speak ill of him, Sheen has had a very difficult time rebuilding his career. Although it's hard to put a pin in just one interview in particular that really ended Sheen's career, there are certainly a bevy of bizarre ones to choose from. Perhaps the worst was when he was on the Today Show for a very candid conversation.
People that aren't special, people that don't have tiger blood and, Adonis DNA.
Strong people have relapsed. Strong people have started using again. How do you avoid that?
Fools. Trolls.
In at number 7, Tom Cruise. During an interview in 2005 with former Today Show host Matt Lauer, Tom Cruise wanted to make it very clear to the host that he knew more about the history of psychiatry than Matt Lauer did. This interview came at the height of the publicity about Tom joining Scientology, which became the painfully awkward main subject for a majority of their discussion. The highlight of the interview, though, was when Tom Cruise was asked about his previous criticism of Brooke Shields and her use of antidepressants, for which the megastar actor responded by calling her a glib. Anytime that Matt wanted to argue how antidepressants actually have helped people in the past, Tom would constantly dismiss him and just ask that they move on.
Do you understand that The difference is this was not against her will, though. But this wasn't against Brooke's will.
Matt, I'm asking you a question.
I understand there's abuse of all of these things.
No, you see, here's the problem. You don't know the history of psychiatry. I do.
In at number 6, Miles Teller. Miles has been involved in more projects following this disaster of an interview, but only because he made a public apology for what he did. For a while following this interview, though, his career seemed to be over. I mean, it really was that offensive to the interviewer that fans condemned the actor for his rude behavior. The young Whiplash actor had plenty of potential until he seemingly closed the door on all future roles with just a single interview. Throughout the 2015 Esquire interview, the actor compared his private parts to a glass, then asked the writer to cut his meat for him at the restaurant where the interview took place, and that he believes that he's better looking than the public thinks he is. Looking back, he admits to being a huge jerk, which is a bit of an understatement to say the least. In at number 5, Jesse Eisenberg.
Do you know the comedian Carrot Top?
Yes, horrible.
Well, you were like the Carrot Top of interviewers.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah. No, and it's a good thing. It's
I'm
a good
gonna
thing.
go cry now.
No, don't cry now. Cry after the interview's over.
While promoting the film Now You See Me, Jesse Eisenberg just could not contain his utter disdain for this interview. Right out of the gate, he was on the offensive. The interviewer refers to Morgan Freeman simply as Freeman, for which Jesse then takes real offense to. He then, as you saw, remarks that she's the Carrot Top of interviewing, which insults the interviewer so badly that she just hurries Jesse to complete a magic trick or whatever so that they can just wrap this whole thing up. The entire interview is just one of the most uncomfortable things that I've ever seen, and this is only number 5 on the list. Trust me though, if you haven't watched this full interview, you must. It is just such a terrible exchange back and forth between an actor and an interviewer. A true masterclass of what not to do in press interviews. In at number 4, Billy Bob Thornton. As great as a career that old Billy Bob has had as an actor, he is also in a band called the Boxmasters. Although oddly enough, whenever he does interviews now, he insists that they only talk about the band and never ever bring up his acting career, which is really weird considering how prolific this guy was as an actor. You'd think if the interviewer was even a little bit of a fan of his, he would be really disappointed to get this demand before starting the conversation with him. The biggest blow up by far that was viewed as one of his most awkward interviews was when he and his band were on the show called Q for CBC in Canada. The interviewer tried his best to talk to Billy, but he always answered in a very confused way, which left the band feeling awkward to answer the questions on his behalf.
I wasn't instructed to. I'm not really instructed. You guys are here as a band. You're performing, but
the producer was instructed.
Right,
so, but somewhere along the way.
I mean, that was one of the rare times that he actually spoke with the interviewer, and I actually can't believe that he just told the interviewer how he was instructed not to call his music career a hobby. Like, no wonder this guy's had 5 different marriages. All failed. What a rude dude. In number 3, Tony Danza. Before an interview with a local news station even began, Tony Danza was caught just slamming the local news in very colorful language. Unbeknownst to him, everything he was saying was all airing directly to live television. And then to make matters even worse, the news anchor is desperately trying to get him to just shut up for a second, and when she finally got his attention and gently reprimanded him for his words, Tony Danza didn't even bother apologizing for the unkind words that he was using regarding this woman's profession.
Kim, I'm telling you, this is crazy. I don't want to do this.
Tony.
I'm going to be part of the local news. How exciting.
Nowadays, he would probably beg to be part of any news segment or interview for that matter, considering how this one stunt really sullied his acting career. In at number 2, Hugh Grant. While some English accents may sound charming, Hugh Grant's personality canceled out all of that for Jon Stewart at The Daily Show. After appearing on the show, Jon Stewart said that he was banning Grant for being a big pain in the Stewart continued saying that he would never grant him back on the show. Pun intended. During an onstage Q&A, Jon remarked that they've had dictators on the show, but Hugh Grant was still his least favorite guest. Apparently, Hugh spent most of the day just complaining that he even had to be there, and even flat out said that he had better things to do. For which the staff of The Daily Show didn't really care to hear, nor did Jon Stewart. So, thanks to his high maintenance attitude, he was banned from the show with 0 apologies. Last but certainly not least, in our number 1 spot, Pamela Anderson. I don't know if she was wasted or what, but right from the very beginning of this interview in 2006 with the comedian John Rope McManus, it was a disaster. Upon her introduction, she came running out with more energy than that time Tom Cruise jumped on Oprah's couch. Pamela greeted the crowd with a hair flip and then proceeded to toss a handful of green candy, I think they were M&Ms, doesn't matter, grabbed the whole handful, tossed them into the crowd. Candy that was plucked from a bowl at the table of the interview. Take a look at this.
glasses today.
And that's not all by the sounds of things.
Although the real nail in her coffin was the drama that led up to this bizarre interview with the former Baywatch star. According to John, the show runs live and Pamela was late, so he actually had to start the show before she was even in the building. When she finally did show up, she really seemed like she was doing everything to hurry up the process and just get out of there. Multiple times he genuinely asked her if she was okay, but that only made things even more awkward. And thus her career was finished, he said dramatically.
Starting off our list at number 10 is Jesse Eisenberg. The actor has always been called socially awkward and has always shown this not so welcoming attitude when it comes to the press. One of his awkward and demeaning interviews went viral back in 2013 when he did an interview with Romina Puga from Univision about his new movie coming out called Now You See Me.
I'll tell you the problem with the trick is that the thumbs don't look like an end of a finger.
You just have a fat thumb, though.
No, my thumb's fine, thank you, but
Romina had a few notes written on her hand so that she could remember them during the interview, and he had no problem calling her out on them, saying that she can't remember a simple question and also told her that she is a horrible interviewer.
what did you write on your hand?
Nothing.
Well, I saw there was a lot of things. What was it?
A lot of things.
Are they questions?
No.
Are you secretly hiding questions for the interview? You're wondering what it's like to work with Morgan Freeman and you can't remember that?
His exact way of saying it was, he asked her if she knew the comedian Carrot Top. She responded with, yes, horrible. And Jesse said, I quote, well, you are like the Carrot Top of interviewers. The interview awkwardly continued on, where he continued to make comments about the interview being over soon, and also said that if she was trying to find her way in a crowd, he wouldn't actually want to find her and that he'd rather be alone.
Do you know the comedian Carrot Top?
Yes, horrible.
Well, you were like the Carrot Top of interviewers.
Ooh.
Yeah. No, and it's a good thing. It's
I'm
a good
gonna
thing.
go cry now.
No, don't cry now. Cry after the interview's over.
Well, isn't he just a ray of sunshine? People haven't received his interviews very well, and the majority of them can't get on board with his whole attitude and behavior. In at number 9 is Paris Hilton. This interview was more of a chance for her to have a comeback in her career, which was already destroyed, but she just kind of blew it. After her career started to fade out, we didn't really hear much from her until 2011 when she signed up for an interview with ABC, which was meant to give us a look into her life and what she's up to now. The interview took place at her home, which started out great. We got to see her home, her dogs, and she just seemed to be in good spirits. That was until the reporter, Dan Harris, began to question whether her celebrity status was running out and being taken over by her close friend, Kim Kardashian. He worded it as nicely as possible, but she just couldn't handle the thought of it. He brought up the fact that her show called The World According to Paris had received a low rating and asked if that upsets her. You could clearly tell that it does, but she responds simply by just saying no. She begins to talk to her publicist, who is standing off set, saying that she wants to be done with the interview. She ends up walking off, but her mic was still on, and she told her publicist that she doesn't want any of this footage being used.
Do you ever worry about your moment having passed? You want to wrap up?
When I was curious about one thing going back to...
So, what do you guys think? Do you think she was acting like a diva by giving one-word answers and leaving? Tell me down in the comments. Next up at number 8 is John Mayer. Back in 2010, he did an interview with Playboy where he sparked a heated debate among his fans, and people lost a lot of respect for him. His relationships with stars like Jessica Simpson have all been documented in the tabloids, but he dished on their relationship in a very strange and disrespectful way. When asked about his ex, Jessica, he started to speak about their sex life, saying that she was like crack cocaine to him. Sexually. He said he wanted to snort her and would sell his belongings even if she charged him $10,000 to sleep with her. He continues to share how many people he's been sleeping with since the breakup, and says he also spends a lot of his mornings watching porn in bed. If the sex talk wasn't enough to set off his fans, his comments about race would. He said, I'm just very. And if you can't handle my very, then I'm a douchebag. That's why black people love me. He went on to say that he gets a hood pass and refers to them as the N-word. Immediately after his interview was published, it caused tons of controversy where he was called an asshat and became a trending topic, but not for the reasons that you really want to be trending. Sliding into number 7 is Tom Cruise. We've seen him lose his temper on a few different occasions, so it's not much of a surprise that he's wound up on this list. He made comments that people didn't appreciate, like the time he criticized Brooke Shields for taking antidepressants. She took them for postpartum depression, but since Tom is a Scientologist, he doesn't believe in those kinds of drugs or therapy. So, during an interview back in June 2005 with NBC's Today Show, the reporter Matt Lauer asked him about his criticism criticism, and he didn't like that it was brought up. The actor ended up calling him a glib and told him he doesn't know what he's talking about. In anger, he said, "You don't know the history of psychiatry. I do." He continued to discuss his Scientology beliefs, which causes enough controversy in itself, and said that because Lauer admitted to using psychiatric drugs in the past, he was actually advocating the use of Ritalin and that it's wrong.
I've never agreed with psychiatry, ever. Before I was a Scientologist, I never agreed with psychiatry. And then when I started studying the history of psychiatry, I started realizing more and more why I didn't agree with psychiatry.
His anger, defensive mechanism, and attitude isn't a shock really, but it just still isn't necessary. At number 6 is Joan Rivers. The woman is known to be a harsh critic when it comes to her time on Fashion Police, but is it harsh if it's true? That is the real debate. Some people appreciate her brutal honesty, while others think that it's just straight up rude, which is the main reason why she went into a rage and walked out in the middle of a CNN interview back in 2014. She was doing a live stream interview with CNN host Frederica Whitfield, who started off by joking around saying that her show Fashion Police was mean, and that was enough to trigger Rivers. Everything from that moment on just escalated very quickly. CNN asked her why she fights to end animal cruelty while she still wears fur, and her response was, "Are you wearing leather shoes? Then shut up."
The cover of your book, you're wearing a fur, and you knew that there would probably be animal rights activists.
You know, this whole interview is becoming a defensive interview.
No!
Are you wearing leather shoes?
Yeah,
shut up.
She then continued to go on a rant saying that the interview is turning into a defensive one, and she insults the lady one last time before storming off set. She said, "You are not the one to interview a person who does humor. Sorry," and rips off her earpiece before leaving.
And you do this, and you're mean, and you're that. You are not the one to interview a person who does humor. Sorry.
Are we serious?
However, she didn't turn off her microphone, and after leaving the set, they recorded her calling the host the C word. Her exit strategy wasn't thought out very well. Halfway through the list, at number 5 is Jerry Seinfeld. Fans were shook when the hit TV series Seinfeld came to an end, and everyone was pointing the finger at Jerry, wondering what exactly happened. He didn't like that very much, and he lost his cool on Larry King back in 2007 when he asked him about it during an interview. He was live on CNN for the interview and was actually there to promote his new project, B-Movie. Larry ends up asking him if he canceled the show or if the network canceled him. A pretty standard question to ask since the show was around for so many years and was coming to an end all of a sudden. But rather than simply answering him, he got extremely offended and started to become a bit ignorant. He made it clear that he had 75 million viewers and that it was his choice to quit. Larry tries to move on from the question when he sees his response, but Jerry continues to interrupt him, even to a point where he can't cut to a commercial break when he is supposed to.
75 million viewers last episode.
Boy, you don't take it so bad.
Well, that's the big difference between being canceled and being number one.
Okay, I'm sorry.
He even says the famous line, "Do you know who I am?"
Do you know who I am?
Jewish guy, Brooklyn.
Yes.
Okay.
Fans responded to the interview saying that he overreacted and could have simply just answered the question gracefully. There was no point to prove. We clearly all know that your show was a success. Alright you guys, at number 4 we have Mel Gibson. Are you shocked? No, didn't think so. He's known for having anger issues, and the majority of them it has been well documented through audio recordings or videos, so it's not like I'm just assuming all of this. One of his interviews went viral back in 2010 when we got to see a piece of his angry side come out. He was doing a live stream interview with WGN News, and the reporter Dean Richards asked him about some incidents from his past, like his alcohol use and bad temper. 4 years prior to the interview, he was arrested and got a DUI, so he asked if he feels the public would receive him differently now. Mel was outraged by the question, which he showed by the expression on his face. He responded by saying, "That's almost 4 years ago, dude. I mean, I've moved on. I guess you haven't." He ends up continuing and says, "Let's move on, dude, come on." He doesn't say goodbye or anything as Dean ends the interview. He just gives a thumbs up and sips his coffee. And right after the interview ends, he calls Dean an not knowing that the video was still recording.
It's good to see you back in the saddle and doing what you do best. Thanks a lot for joining us, Mel. Take care.
Bye-bye.
In spot number 3 is Tracy Morgan. It's hard to forget about the interview he did in 2007 when he was clearly drunk on camera.
Ladies, my Mercedes. I'm the ooh child.
The reporter, Robert Holguin, seemed super uncomfortable and out of his element when dealing with him throughout the interview on ABC7. But he remained professional and was a good sport about it, laughing and making jokes with Tracy, who was completely out of control. Morgan took his shirt off, which ultimately ripped his microphone off, and began slapping his belly, calling it a loaf of bread, and said it was his mating call. Robert tried hard to keep the interview going and talking about his upcoming show, but Tracy was in his own little world. After the interview cut to commercial, you could hear Robert saying, "I am going to get fired." At number 2 on our list is Roseanne Barr. She had an incredibly successful career, but it crumbled after she tweeted out some racist comments. She lost everything, including her ABC sitcom called Roseanne. She tweeted out a comment where she compared Barack Obama's advisor, Valerie Jarrett, to a character from Planet of the Apes and linked her to a group called Muslim Brotherhood. During an interview with Inside, she spoke about the incident with a cigarette in hand and lost all control of her emotions and began to scream. Like literally scream. She went off the rails yelling, "I thought the was white." She continues to scream out different curse words and in between takes a puff from her cigarette, maybe in hopes to try and calm down, which clearly didn't work.
I thought the was white! Damn it!
This is her back? Seriously?
Throughout the interview, she looks totally out of it and at time asks the producer, "Are you filming?" The producer can't help but laugh at her erratic behavior and just keeps repeating himself, telling her that she's already explained this to them 300 times, but she just keeps going on about it. And not gracefully. Taking our number 1 spot is Michael Jackson. Over 10 years ago, he was charged on different allegations of child sexual abuse that were filed against him. A documentary about his life, including these charges, was released and showed an interview where he made inappropriate comments that left people stunned. When speaking about his own children, he admitted during an interview that he allowed their friends to come over and sleep in his bed with him. Ain't nothing normal about that. He explained that he doesn't see any problem with it because, I quote, "It's all very charming." The interviewer was baffled that he would be saying these things considering the allegations that were against him, but Michael stood firm on his beliefs and referred to the young children as his friends. He simply didn't see anything wrong with a grown man being friends with young children. After hearing these things come out of the singer's mouth himself, his reputation was never really the same after that.
In at number 10, Tom Hiddleston. Back in June of 2016, it was announced that America's favorite villain, Mr. Tom Hiddleston, was romantically involved with Taylor Swift. They were dubbed a celebrity name of Hiddle Swift and all seemed, well and good. Although in August of 2016, they were fighting over his scheduling with Thor Ragnarok in Australia. Then by September of 2016, they were over and both sides alleged that they dumped the other one. Tom said it was because he wanted to go more public with their relationship, and Taylor Swift alluded to another reason for it ending in a song of hers, I guess. Either way, Tom was a bit shaken up by the whole situation, and during an interview with GQ magazine, he kind of burned himself. I mean, he was trying to distract from the topic of Swift by sharing his recipe for bolognese, but Tom still managed to talk way too much about Taylor Swift. Even after the interview had finished, he apparently visited the reporter's door at 6 a.m. to further clarify things that he had said about her in the interview. In at number 9, Paris Hilton. Paris Hilton not only became famous for being the great-granddaughter of the guy who created Hilton Hotels, but she also invented the idea of influencers. She would tell the paparazzi where she was going to be and then end up all over page 6 whenever she did something crazy at a nightclub. Although she also had a brief stint acting in reality TV shows. In fact, for a while, she believed that she was the world's top reality TV star, even though her former friend Kim Kardashian was kind of on the come up. During one interview with ABC in 2011, she was doing her very best to stay calm as the reporter grilled her with questions meant to discount her worth in society. Then Paris was asked by the reporter if she felt like her career was over, and in response, she just walked right out of the interview. I mean, people were already feeling that her career was done, but nobody, I guess, had the heart to tell her. So when she found out just as much, she left the interview, which kind of answered the question for us. In at number 8, Kathie Lee Gifford. Kathie is best known for her 15-year run on the talk show Live with Regis and Kathie Lee, which she co-hosted with Regis Philbin. She has also done some acting in a few films, but her primary focus has been working for live entertainment news shows. Although after she maybe had one too many glasses of wine, I don't know, I think they do a Today Show happy hour, she conducted a very embarrassing interview with Martin Short. Martin was coming on the Today Show to promote, and it looks like Kathy didn't do her research beforehand. Martin's wife had passed away 2 years prior to the interview, and Gifford had no clue. She threw multiple questions about his wife and his relationship, but at no point did he have a chance to actually correct her. Although right before the commercial break, he definitely had to update her. I mean, she apparently profusely apologized for this big gaffe, but her career was already tanked at that point. And if not her career, at least her reputation. In at number 7, Crispin Glover. While Crispin Glover has never really been considered a typical leading man, he has certainly distinguished himself as one of the more intriguing personalities in Hollywood. His unusual characters and personal projects have inspired a cult-like following that has dubbed him both a madman and a genius. However, an interview back in 1987 stunted his career a little bit, and we wouldn't see him on many late-night interviews for a while. While speaking with David Letterman, Crispin showed up as Ruben. Ruben was a character that he was portraying in an upcoming film called Ruben and Ed, although not a single soul told Letterman that this was the intended plan, so he was completely surprised when it happened. Sometimes that works, I mean, but in this case, it was a disaster. The entire interview was just Dave trying to keep up with Crispin and his Ruben rants, but ultimately ended in Letterman just walking out of the interview. In at number 6, Gary Coleman. First and foremost, rest in peace, Gary Coleman. It was terrible to see this great actor's career be taken down and then ridiculed when he had to go get a regular job. I mean, before he passed, Gary did an interview in 2010 with The Insider, and things got very heated. One of those hosts started asking him questions about his ex-wife Susan Price, but Coleman did not take this well. He began yelling expletives at the mortified host as he immediately departed the interview. It must have been a very touchy subject, but this is also a reminder of why it's important to brief guests with the questions that they'll be asked. I mean, these curveballs from reporters rarely lead to anything good, and Gary's interview is kind of proof of that. In at number 5, Cara Delevingne. Let's just say her dry British humor was not really received by these happy-go-lucky morning news anchors at CBS Sacramento. I mean, at the start of the interview, she was asked some very dumb questions. I mean, for example, the film Paper Towns was based on a book, so they asked her if she had read the book, and then immediately after made a snide comment about her probably not having enough time to read. Now, Cara obviously takes offense to this, judging by her body language, but instead decides to flip it into a joke, saying that she didn't even read the script, just winged it.
No, I never read the book or the script, actually. I kind of winged it.
And the interviewers actually take this as factual for a moment before her laughing kind of cuts the tension. That's not even the most awkward part of this interview, though.
I think it probably is us. Well, then on that note...
We figured as much. We figured as much.
We'll let you go then. How about that? We'll let you go take a little nap, maybe get a Red Bull. How about that?
After one interviewer asked her why she isn't as excited as her other interviews, she remarks that it's very early and that she thought it was going well, so again, jokingly, she said, "It must be you." And the lady in the middle, oh my god, she sounded so bitter. "We'll let you take a little nap and have a Red Bull? How about that?" Yes. How about that level of professional journalism? Good morning, Sacramento. Although ever since this interview, we haven't really seen Cara in any more movies, and even the ones that we have seen her in, it was like, whatever. In at number 4, Robert Pattinson. When the Twilight series was at its peak, Rob had to do a ton of press to promote the film, and his agent made it expressly clear to every single interviewer not to mention his rumored relationship. People were already speculating that Pattinson was dating co-star Kristen Stewart, but they definitely wanted to keep things as private as possible. However, when he went on air with Ryan Seacrest, things went sideways. As soon as Seacrest started asking about his rumored relationship, Rob's agent gave him the cue to leave the interview. Now, this didn't exactly destroy his career, but it certainly put a bad light on the actor for being kind of so dodgy with questions. I mean, if he had have just stayed in the interview and just told Ryan that he didn't want to talk about it, I bet Ryan would have just moved on. I mean, Seacrest has been in that business for so long that he knows how to keep things professional. But I guess he missed the memo on not talking about the relationship thing.
What can you tell them about it?
I also just love that you can see his agent in the back giving the old wrap it up signal to Ryan, and he is definitely ignoring her. In at number 3, Jim Carrey. While at the New York Fashion Week in 2017, Jim Carrey made a rare appearance, and while walking down the red carpet, he did his best to avoid an interview with E! News. At first, he kind of tried to twirl around a few times and not really stand still, hoping that would work, but man, she was persistent. Carrey then says that he wanted to find the most meaningless event that he could go to, and that's how he ended up there. The interviewer tries to keep the integrity of the event high and claims that it's a celebration of icons, for which Jim says, "Icons don't exist. I don't believe in personalities. I don't believe you exist, but there is a wonderful fragrance in the air." Before departing from this awkward interview, he leaves her with this nugget of truth.
It's not our world.
None of this is real?
Nope.
It was a while before we saw Jim Carrey again after that, but we're sure he wants it that way. I mean, it probably made keeping the Sonic live-action film quiet a lot easier. In at number 2, Mel Gibson. While promoting his film Edge of Darkness in a 2010 interview with WGN-TV, Mel Gibson appeared like he really didn't want to be there. I mean, the best part was that he wasn't even physically there. He just was appearing via satellite because it was probably the fastest way to do this press run. Although among all of the questions that annoyed the actor, it was when he dove into Gibson's drinking that kind of really set him off. The reporter got even more bold by asking him about his previous anti-Semitic remarks, to which Mel replied that was 4 years ago and he had already apologized for that. And the reporter, sensing that Mel was about to cuss him out on live air, he kind of shifted back to promoting the film. Good move. Although Mel Gibson thought that the interview had disconnected, which resulted in some very troubling remarks to air live.
Thanks a lot for joining us, Mel. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Last but certainly not least on our number 1 spot, Courtney Love. Courtney Love has been a mess forever. She does not handle interviews with any ounce of grace, and her crashing an interview with Madonna kind of proves my point. Back at the 1995 MTV VMAs, the interviewer was engaged in a discussion with Madonna when he notices Courtney Love yelling from down below. He then invites her onto the interview platform, even at the behest of Madonna, and things immediately turn to the worst case scenario. She starts drunkenly throwing small items at Madonna, and then she kneels down on the ground, and at that point Madonna just walks off the stage. Courtney then stays and hijacks the entire interview, going on more drunken rants and just being generally all over the place. I mean, literally all over the place. And it turns out the guy should have just listened to Madonna and had security keep Courtney back. Then we wouldn't have had this. In at number 10, Quentin Tarantino.
It's my job to try and ask you to.
And I'm shutting your butt down.
And that's entirely your. That's entirely
This
your.
is a-
What a line. I'm shutting your butt down. Quentin Tarantino was having none of this interviewer's questions, but still tried to go along with it. He kept his cool for, about 3 minutes before the gloves started to come off. The journalist's name is Krishnan Gurumurthy, and he has become notorious for asking celebrities the most awkward and really big questions about themselves, their past, and their work. Stuff that would be better suited for a 3-hour podcast or an episode of 60 Minutes. However, during these press junkets where they're only doing the interview to sell their film, it's hardly the place or time. In at number 9, Cara Delevingne. Let's just say her dry British humor was not really received by these happy-go-lucky morning news anchors at CBS Sacramento. At the start of the interview, she was asked some very dumb questions. For example, the film Paper Towns was based on a book, so they asked her if she had read the book, and then immediately after made a snide comment about her probably not having enough time to read. Cara obviously takes offense to this judging by her body language, but instead decides to flip it into a joke, saying that she didn't even read the script, just winged the whole thing. The interviewers actually take this as factual for a moment before her laughing finally cuts the tension. And that's not even the most awkward part of this interview though.
I think it probably is us. Well then on that note,
We figured as much.
we'll let you go then. How about that? We'll let you go take a little nap, maybe get a Red Bull. How about that?
After one interviewer asks her why she isn't as excited as her other interviews, she remarks that it's very early and that she thought it was going well, so again, jokingly, she says it must be you. And the interviewer in the middle, like, oh my god, she sounded so bitter. That line of, well, we'll let you go take a little nap and have a Red Bull, how about that? Yes, how about that level of professional journalism? Good job, Good Morning Sacramento. In at number 8, Kourtney Kardashian. After her sister Kim was robbed in Paris, Today Extra, an Australian news outlet, was interviewing Kourtney via satellite from Los Angeles.
Okay.
They asked her how Kim was doing following this traumatic event, but suddenly Kourtney's face just freezes. You then can sort of hear what sounds like her publicist saying, "Do not answer that question."
Looks like Kourtney doesn't really want to go there with
I think
that
she's
question.
blanking me. I think she's totally blanking me on that question.
I think there's probably a PR person there saying, you know, don't talk about it.
The interviewer then goes on a bit of a rant saying that she could simply say her sister is doing fine, as they too speculate that she was told to be quiet. However, she then does answer the question on her own, saying, "She's not doing great, I think we're all still shaken up." And her response to what appeared to be her blanking was that the audio from their end wasn't coming through. In at number 7, Jesse Eisenberg.
Do you know the comedian Carrot Top?
Yes. horrible.
You were like the carrot top of interviewers. No, and it's a good thing. It's
I'm
a
gonna
good
go
thing.
cry now.
No, don't cry now.
While promoting the film Now You See Me, Jesse Eisenberg just could not contain his utter disdain for this interview. Right out of the gate, he was on the offensive. The interviewer refers to Morgan Freeman as simply Freeman, for which Jesse takes offense to, oddly enough. He then, as you saw, remarks she's the carrot top of interviewing, which insults the interviewer so bad that she hurries Jesse to complete a magic trick just so that they can wrap it up. And the entire interview is just one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever seen, and this is only number 7 on the list. Trust me though, if you haven't watched this full interview, you must. You must do it. It is just a terrible exchange back and forth between an actor and a vlogger, essentially. In at number 6, Samuel L. Jackson. When you are interviewing a celebrity as big as Samuel L. Jackson, it's imperative that you do your homework. You know, like learn his name. When Sam Jackson was promoting the RoboCop remake, he was asked about a recent Super Bowl commercial he did. Sam replies, "What Super Bowl commercial?" and then hits KTLA reporter Sam Rubin with this.
What Super Bowl commercial?
Oh, you know what? I've admit my mistake. You know what?
See, you're as crazy as the people on Twitter.
Jackson then proceeds to say, "I'm not Lawrence Fishburne. We don't all look alike. We may be all black and famous, but we all don't look alike." And Rubin repeatedly apologizes for this very public faux pas, but the damage is done and this just got super awkward. Jackson doesn't let up though. He questions Sam Rubin saying, "You're the entertainment reporter?" To make his point known, Samuel L. Jackson posted this image on Twitter of him wearing a t-shirt that says he's not Lawrence Fishburne. You know, just to avoid any further confusion. In at number 5, Jim Carrey. At the New York Fashion Week in 2017, Jim Carrey made a rare appearance, and while walking down the red carpet, he did his best to avoid an interview with E! News. At first, he tried to kind of twirl around a few times and not really stand still, hoping that that would work, but she was persistent. Carrey then says he wanted to find the most meaningless event that he could go to, and that's how he ended up there. The interviewer, trying to keep the integrity of this event high, claims that it's a celebration of icons, for which Jim says, "Icons don't exist. I don't believe in personalities. I don't believe you exist. But there is a wonderful fragrance in the air." And before departing from this awkward interview, he leaves her with this little nugget of truth.
Is relevant, that's not that
Here's the
uplifting.
thing, it's not our world.
None
That's
of this
the
is
key.
real?
Nope.
So you're just passing
We don't
through.
matter.
In at number 4, Dakota Johnson. This, without a doubt, has to be the cringe heard around the world. We got to watch the live falling out between Dakota Johnson and her mother Melanie Griffith on the red carpet of the Oscars. Oh, the Oscars. Please insert fake laughter here. Man, Hollywood is so fake. Just because the cameras are rolling, they fake laugh their way through this entirely awkward interview. And the whole thing started off on a really bad note. The interviewer praises Melanie while repeatedly calling Dakota her little girl, which she is, but it just downplays how successful she's been on her own. Then when her mother is asked if she's seen 50 Shades of Grey, her mom outright says that she wouldn't watch the movie, which clearly hurts her daughter regardless of the content and the positive reviews. A kid is always looking for that recognition from their parents. In at number 3, Robert Downey Jr. This guy again. You remember that interviewer from earlier that was just a little too pushing? Well, he's back again, but this time with RDJ. And didn't I tell you folks earlier that he was known for just having the worst interviewers? I mean, this guy should be questioning politicians, not actors about their upcoming movies. He goes way too deep with Robert Downey Jr. in this interview, to the point where Robert Downey Jr. just says, "You know what? We're done here."
What are we doing?
Well, I'm just asking questions, that's all.
Right.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oof, that slapped so hard it felt like a movie. Speaking of slaps, when Downey stands up to leave, he gives Krishnan a very hard pat on the shoulder as if to say, "Good work, you dummy." The reason why he got so upset was because these questions virtually came out of left field. He went from asking him about superhero movies to Robert's, let's say, tumultuous past. In at number 2, Tom Hardy. If you thought that was hard to watch, just wait until you see this awkward interview with Tom Hardy. At the Toronto Film Festival during a press conference for his film Legend, he's asked by an LGBT news organization about his sexuality, claiming that while his character is upfront about it, Tom on the other hand has been much more ambiguous about his sexuality, which leads to this kind of terrible exchange. It's the epitome of awkwardness.
Are you asking me about my sexuality?
Sure.
Why?
Why?
Thank you.
Okay.
Why indeed. That thank you he gives at the end too, oof, I felt that. Last but not least, at our number 1 spot, Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld is one of the most successful comedians of all time. His show Seinfeld was on television for 9 years, and Jerry's decision to go out on top proved to be one of the most lucrative deals ever for this comedian. Since the final episode, the show has generated over $3 billion in repeat fees, but for whatever reason, Larry King thought they cancelled the show. Even though Larry King worked for CNN, he wasn't known for his hard-hitting questions, yet for whatever reason, he decided to use an interview promoting Jerry Seinfeld's B movie to ask him if Seinfeld had been canceled.
Is this still CNN? I was the #1 show on television, Larry. Do you know who I am?
And you can see in Seinfeld's body language how frustrated he gets when Larry even tries to insinuate this. Jerry does not back down though and immediately goes on the attack, telling King that he was the #1 show on television before adding the very crass line of, "Do you know who I am? What's the deal with you not knowing who I am?"
In at number 10, Princess Diana. The royal family is one of the most secretive organizations in the world, so everyone couldn't believe it when Princess Diana decided to expose all of her dirty secrets on TV in 1995 in an interview with BBC journalist Martin Bashir. The interview was after her divorce with Charles, when she was the most scared of the family. During the program, she revealed her struggles with disordered eating after Prince Charles made comments about her weight, along with talking about her postpartum depression and the affair she knew Charles was having with Camilla. Diana even talked about her own love affair with her writing instructor, James Hewitt. Even worse, it was exposed years later that the reason Diana gave such a detailed interview is because she was being blackmailed by the journalist Martin Bashir. Bashir acted in a quote deceitful way and faked documents to obtain the interview, an inquiry by the BBC discovered. And at number 9, Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore exposed herself, literally, during an interview with David Letterman. While doing the interview, Barrymore asked if she could dance for him. Letterman said yes, and all of a sudden Drew was on top of his desk dancing around, and then she suddenly flashed him. She had her back turned to the audience who didn't see, but it was quite a shock to Letterman. Apparently it was Letterman's birthday, and Barrymore said this was her present to him. This was during the time that Barrymore was having a rebellious streak, and she had just posed for Playboy and was feeling very open about her body. Barrymore revealed years later that the moment was not planned, and while they were talking she had a light bulb moment and wanted to dance. And at number 8, Jason Segel and Paul Rudd. During a promotional interview for the movie I Love You Man, Segel and Rudd admitted to being totally stoned. And if you watch the interview, it's honestly not that difficult to tell. In the beginning, the pair start talking about other movies with a bromance storyline, going back and forth naming the best ones. And funny enough, all the movies they named have the word stone in it. Coincidence? I think not. The pair then start talking about Segel's imaginary friend and can't stop laughing while thinking about it. The interview was hilarious, but I'm sure the studio was not happy with how unprofessional that it was. And at number 7, Paula Abdul. Paula Abdul had a great public reputation because of her role as a judge on American Idol. But that good reputation went down the pipes after this eyebrow-raising interview. In 2007, she was live on air with Fox to talk about the upcoming season of Idol, but it was derailed almost instantly. In the interview, Paula was nothing like the woman we saw on Idol, and honestly she seemed drunk. She was slurring her words, behaving erratically, and just acting like a basket case. Paula later denied she was drunk, and a spokesperson claimed that there was a sound issue during the segment. 2 years later, the singer failed to renew her contract with American Idol and basically disappeared into obscurity. And at number 6, Katherine Heigl. Katherine Heigl was blacklisted from Hollywood after she called out the director of the hit comedy Knocked Up. In a now infamous Vanity Fair interview from 2008, Katherine Heigl slammed director Judd Apatow and called the movie a little sexist. She went on to talk more trash about her character in the film, adding, quote, "It paints the women as shrews, as humorless and uptight. It paints the men as lovable, goofy, fun-loving guys." This incident, along with some other drama of the Grey's Anatomy production, put a huge axe in her career and forced her to apologize. Many years later, Heigl spoke to the Washington Post about being branded as difficult after the comments and blasted the idea that a different opinion made her difficult. She was blacklisted from the industry for a few years, but is back working again and has admitted to her past mistakes. Halfway number 5, Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise's reputation has taken a dive for many reasons over the years, but one moment that really shocked fans was his interview with Matt Lauer. In the interview, his temper changes dramatically, showing the world that Cruise has a very short fuse. In the 2005 interview, Lauer asked Cruise about his comments criticizing Brooke Shields for taking antidepressants for her postpartum depression.
The thing that I'm saying about Brooke is that there's misinformation, okay? And she doesn't understand the history of psychiatry. She doesn't understand in the same way that you don't understand it, man.
Cruise kept going on that he doesn't agree with her decisions. When asked why, Cruise added, quote, "You don't know the history of psychiatry. I do." along with getting more combative as the conversation went on. That, in part with his sketchy divorce from Katie Holmes, made public opinion of him tank. And at number 4, Justin Bieber. An interview that Justin Bieber did with Mojo in the Morning was a complete disaster, for many reasons unfortunately. It started off on the wrong foot, when the interviewer said that Bieber's new music sounded like Justin Timberlake's. Later on, the interviewer asked, quote, "Do you worry about Harry Styles of One Direction around your mom since he likes older women?" Which is a really strange question to ask someone, like, who would even think of that? Justin obviously thought it was very strange as well and clapped back, telling the reporter, quote, "I think you should worry about me around your mom, bro." Since it was just a phone interview, Justin did not waste any more time and just hung up the phone. And at number 3, Quentin Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino can be quite controversial, and a lot of his movies get some sort of backlash. After the release of his hit movie Django Unchained, Tarantino did the media rounds to promote the movie. One reporter asked about the real-life implications of violence that the movie portrays. Instead of giving a thoughtful answer, Tarantino was annoyed about the question and firmly defended the movie. He replied, quote, "It's just a movie, it's just a fantasy," brushing off the question. When the reporter continued to press, Tarantino just straight up refused to answer and replied, quote, "I'm shutting your butt down." A little immature if you ask me. And at number 2, Mark Wahlberg. Showing up drunk to a live TV interview is probably the worst thing a celebrity can do, because there's nothing worse than revealing all your secrets because you're under the influence. While Wahlberg was on the Graham Norton show, he actually admitted that he was pretty drunk, most likely from the drinks he was given backstage in the green room. Wahlberg asked Norton, quote, "Why would you allow people to drink alcohol and come on a show?" Wahlberg tried to keep it together, but after some time he started doing the craziest things. At one point he sat on Norton's lap while rubbing his chest seductively. Obviously viewers loved it, but it was very inappropriate. And finally, number 1, Kourtney Kardashian. This one is super strange, and I'm not sure why this even took place, but either way, it's probably the weirdest interview moment that I have ever seen. Back in 2016, Kourtney was being interviewed on the Australian talk show Today Extra. Kourtney answered some simple questions, then the reporters asked about how Kim was doing after her intense robbery situation. Kourtney then started to answer, but then it looked like someone on her team started talking to her because Kourtney totally ignored the question and looked off camera to someone else, then just said okay. The reporters then asked Kourtney the question again and made it seem like she might have just been breaking up or something. But then Kourtney just sits there blankly looking off screen while the interviewers try to think of something else to ask her. When the host asked if someone else is talking to her, she said, "Yes, sorry." Then I guess the interviewers just cut Kourtney's feed and got on with the program.
At number 10, Vincent Gallo. You always have to be mindful of the things that you say. Your words have a lot of impact and can either make someone's day or ruin it. You must be especially careful with your words when you're trying to get ahead in your career, because one wrong move can set you back significantly or even ruin your career altogether. This is what happened with actor Vincent Gallo, as after one too many failed interviews, his career went down the tubes. Vincent was known to be a little outspoken at times, and he had a history of speaking without a filter, but in 2000, during an interview with a New York Post Page 6 columnist, Vincent said some things about a former co-star that landed him in some hot water and effectively ended his career. During the interview, the columnist asked Vincent about Christina Ricci, who starred alongside Vincent in the 1998 film Buffalo 66, and when the actor spoke about his co-star, he didn't have the nicest things to say. He told the interviewer, quote, "It was okay when she wasn't drunk on the set. I think she's an alcoholic. It was either that or she was on cough syrup the whole time. I don't like her. She's an ungrateful C-word. But it was okay. She's basically a puppet. I told her what to do and she did it." End quote. After this interview, he faced some minor backlash for making such mean comments, and his film career just wasn't the same after that. At number 9, John Lennon. The Beatles were a huge hit at the height of their fame, but members of the band also faced scandal and backlash, as every celebrity does. John Lennon had his share of controversies, but one that did quite a lot of damage to the band's career for a little while was when he said that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. In 1966, John Lennon did an interview where he was asked all sorts of questions, like how he lives and his interests and so on, but his comments on Christianity is where things got heated. In the profile, he said, quote, "Christianity will go. It will vanish and shrink. I needn't to argue about that. I'm right and will be proved right. We're more popular than Jesus now. I don't know which will go first, rock and roll or Christianity. Jesus was alright, but his disciples were thick and ordinary. It's them twisting it that ruins it for me." End quote. Now, when this profile was first released in the UK, no one really thought anything of his comments about Christianity, but when the article was republished worldwide a few months later, things got messy when it hit the US. A radio station in Alabama got a hold hold of John's comments and proposed a ban on the Beatles, refusing to pay their music and smash their records. This anti-Beatles mindset began to spread further, angering more people, until eventually Lennon apologized and things died down, making for a chaotic few months. Now before I carry on with the list, I would like to ask you guys to consider leaving a big old thumbs up on this video if you're enjoying it so far, because it really does help the channel out. At number 8, Tom Cruise. After doing an interview with Matt Lauer back in 2005, Tom Cruise had a bit of a career setback that affected him for a while. During this interview, Tom made some pretty controversial comments about mental health, psychiatry, and made some harsh criticisms about actress Brooke Shields. All of this was caused by Tom's belief in Scientology and the fact that he doesn't believe in medication or therapy. While on the Today Show, Tom and Matt were having a discussion about how the actor criticized Brooke Shields for taking antidepressants for her postpartum depression, and Tom would keep trying to shut down anything Matt would say to defend psychiatry, also going on to say, quote, "You don't know the history of psychiatry, I do," end quote. A lot of people took offense to the comments that he made on this topic, saying that it was uncalled for and that someone's mental health shouldn't be discussed, and so he lost some support from fans. Between that and his position in the Church of Scientology, he lost a lot of popularity, leading to some box office bombs that affected his career for a while afterwards. At number 7, Miles Teller. Actor Miles Teller is a very good actor, but apparently he kinda sucks when it comes to doing interviews. He was set up to have a very promising career after starring in the 2014 award-winning film Whiplash, but after a series of underwhelming interviews, his career started to decline. The first of his interview bombs came in 2014 when he spoke badly of his fellow actors, where he said, quote, "I feel like a lot of actors of my generation are not proper actors. I want to break out of that whole group of actors in their early 20s and really start to put stuff down that lets you know I take this seriously," unquote. Also in that same interview, he spoke harshly of actor John Cusack, where he said, quote, "I guess we look alike. We did some similar movies. He was a leading man that wasn't traditionally good looking, who was offbeat and quirky but confident. I get it, but I don't want his career," end quote. The more bad interviews he gave, the more people started to see Miles as arrogant, cocky, and rude, which certainly did not help his career. At number 6, John Mayer. I feel like we really don't hear much about John Mayer these days, and that could very well be due to a 2010 interview that tanked his career and made him receive a lot of hate. During an interview with Playboy magazine, John made a lot of rude, crude, and racist comments that ruined his public image. At one point during the interview, John dissed his ex-girlfriend Jennifer Aniston and also spoke in too much detail about his other ex-girlfriend Jessica Simpson, and honestly, I would rather not repeat what he said because it was really gross. On top of that, John also proceeded to say the N-word several times throughout the interview, as though it was the cherry on top of this whole mess. After facing a lot of backlash for what was said during the interview, he tweeted an apology, but his career just wasn't really the same. At number 5, Alex Pettyfer. Actor Alex Pettyfer was riding a pretty good wave of success after starring in I Am Number 4 and Magic Mike, but behind the scenes he was ruffling feathers in Hollywood after he was described as, quote, "surly, arrogant, and disrespectful" by The Hollywood Reporter. This entertainment news source exposed what Alex was really like after someone who worked with him on set came forward to share their horror stories with the actor. At one point, Alex's career took a pretty big hit, but things became worse after Alex did an interview with V-Man magazine that really set his career back. During this interview, he called out the entirety of Hollywood, where he said, quote, "LA is growing on me a little bit, but it's still a hole. I think it's this insidious pool where nearly everyone lives in fear. Geographically, it's fantastic, but socially, it's disgusting. I wish they'd run all the C words out," end quote. After these harsh words and the fact that he's a nightmare to work with, Alex's career just wasn't the same. He wasn't welcomed back to reprise his role in the Magic Mike sequel, and since then, he hasn't really been a part of any major projects in the industry. At number 4, Shia LaBeouf. Shia LaBeouf has been having a pretty rough time in Hollywood lately. A few months ago, he was facing backlash after his ex-girlfriend, FKA Twigs, issued a lawsuit against the actor for physically harming her, but before that, Shia had also faced backlash for his unruly behavior both on and off set. What really did him in at one point was an interview he did back in 2008 where he blasted Steven Spielberg after working on Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This movie itself got mixed reviews at the time of its release, but Shia criticized the film's director, and that's when the hate began for the actor. He told the Los Angeles Times, quote, "I think the audience is pretty intelligent. I think they know when you've made crap, and I think if you don't acknowledge it, then why do they trust you the next time you're promoting a movie," end quote. He also went on to say, quote, "I'll probably get a call, but Spielberg needs to hear this. I love him. I love Steven. I have a relationship with Steven that supersedes our business work, and believe me, I talk to him often enough to know that I'm not out of line. And I would never disrespect the man. I think he's a genius. I think he's given me my whole life. He's done so much great work that there's no need for him to feel vulnerable about one film. But when you drop the ball, you drop the ball." End quote. Shia ripped on the director later on in 2016 as well, but at that point, the damage was already done. Looks like you can't criticize one of Hollywood's greatest directors and come out unscathed. At number 3, Wilmer Valderrama. Back in 2006, that 70s show actor Wilmer Valderrama was a guest on Howard Stern's show, and he said some things that he surely regretted saying because after this interview, his career took a pretty big hit. While on the show, the actor shared some information about his private life that frankly, nobody asked for and was very inappropriate. The actor exposed a lot of details about the people that he slept with, going on to reveal that he had slept with Mandy Moore, and even described the experience that no one really needed to know about. He also went on to rate his relationship with actress Jennifer Love Hewitt, and again, nobody needed that information. Wilmer just really exposed a lot of personal information about himself, but faced scrutiny because of how the people he talked about were impacted. A lot of people pointed out how the comments he made were uncalled for, uncomfortable, and inappropriate. It took the actor years to issue an apology for what he said during that interview, but by that time, the damage to his career was already done, and he never quite bounced back. At number 2, Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen was riding a pretty good wave back when he was a star of 2.5 Men, but after his horrible interview on 2020, his career was destroyed and he never fully recovered. After having a hugely successful career, making millions of dollars per season on 2.5 Men, actor Charlie Sheen started to have a downward spiral. Everything sort of came crashing down for him after the interview where he ranted about the 2.5 Men creator, Chuck Lorre. This interview was all over the place, with Charlie behaving frantically, going on tangents, and even calling Chuck Lorre, quote, "a turd and a clown." This interview was all over the news because it was chaotic, Charlie was put on blast, and his career just came to a screeching halt. Not only that, but as a result of the comments Charlie made during the interview, he was fired from 2.5 Men, and that was a pretty big deal since this is how he was pulling in so much money. The actor pretty much hit rock bottom after that and never really made his return. And finally, at number 1, Megan Fox. Megan Fox is only now starting to make her way back to Hollywood after she was essentially blacklisted from the industry after she faced backlash for speaking badly about Michael Bay in an interview. Megan criticized the Transformers director during a 2009 interview with Wonderland magazine when she was asked about what it was like to work with Michael Bay. In response to the question, Megan told the source, quote, "He's a nightmare to work with, but when you get him away from set, he's not in director mode. I kinda really enjoy his personality because he's so awkward, so hopelessly awkward. He has no social skills at all and it's endearing to watch him. He's vulnerable and fragile in real life, then on set he's a tyrant. Shia and I almost die when we make Transformers movies. He has you do some really insane things that insurance would never let you do." End quote. Because of what she said, Michael Bay fired her from future Transformers films and made Hollywood turn against her by telling them that Megan was a nightmare to work with. She had a hard time making it in Hollywood until recently when she came out to reveal the truth about how she was being treated in the industry. She's on her way back to Hollywood's good graces, but for a while there, her career was ruined.
In at number 10, Tom Hiddleston. Back in June of 2016, it was announced that America's favorite villain, Mr. Tom Hiddleston, was romantically involved with Taylor Swift. They were dubbed a celebrity name of Hiddle Swift and all seemed, well and good. Although in August of 2016, they were fighting over his scheduling with Thor Ragnarok in Australia. Then by September of 2016, they were over and both sides alleged that they dumped the other one. Tom said it was because he wanted to go more public with their relationship, and Taylor Swift alluded to another reason for it ending in a song of hers, I guess. Either way, Tom was a bit shaken up by the whole situation, and during an interview with GQ magazine, he kind of burned himself. I mean, he was trying to distract from the topic of Swift by sharing his recipe for bolognese, but Tom still managed to talk way too much about Taylor Swift. Even after the interview had finished, he apparently visited the reporter's door at 6 a.m. to further clarify things that he had said about her in the interview. In at number 9, Paris Hilton. Paris Hilton not only became famous for being the great-granddaughter of the guy who created Hilton Hotels, but she also invented the idea of influencers. She would tell the paparazzi where she was going to be and then end up all over page 6 whenever she did something crazy at a nightclub. Although she also had a brief stint acting in reality TV shows. In fact, for a while, she believed that she was the world's top reality TV star, even though her former friend Kim Kardashian was kind of on the come up. During one interview with ABC in 2011, she was doing her very best to stay calm as a reporter grilled her with questions meant to discount her worth in society. Then Paris was asked by the reporter if she felt like her career was over, and in response, she just walked right out of the interview. I mean, people were already feeling that her career was done, but nobody, I guess, had the heart to tell her. So when she found out just as much, she left the interview, which kind of answered the question for us. In at number 8, Kathie Lee Gifford. Kathie is best known for her 15-year run on the talk show Live with Regis and Kathie Lee, which she co-hosted with Regis Philbin. She has also done some acting in a few films, but her primary focus has been working for live entertainment news shows. Although after she maybe had one too many glasses of wine, I don't know, I think they do a Today Show happy hour, she conducted a very embarrassing interview with Martin Short. Martin was coming on the Today Show to promote, and it looks like Kathie didn't do her research beforehand. Martin's wife had passed away 2 years prior to the interview, and Gifford had no clue. She threw multiple questions about his wife and his relationship, but at no point did he have a chance to actually correct her. Although right before the commercial break, he definitely had to update her. I mean, she apparently profusely apologized for this big gaffe, but her career was already tanked at that point. And if not her career, at least her reputation. In at number 7, Crispin Glover. While Crispin Glover has never really been considered a typical leading man, he has certainly distinguished himself as one of the more intriguing personalities in Hollywood. His unusual characters and personal projects have inspired a cult-like following that has dubbed him both a madman and a genius. However, an interview back in 1987 stunted his career a little bit, and we wouldn't see him on many late-night interviews for a while. While speaking with David Letterman, Crispin showed up as Ruben. Ruben was a character that he was portraying in an upcoming film called Ruben and Ed, although not a single soul told Letterman that this was the intended plan, so he was completely surprised when it happened. Sometimes that works, I mean, but in this case, it was a disaster. The entire interview was just Dave trying to keep up with Crispin and his Ruben rants, but ultimately ended in Letterman just walking out of the interview. In at number 6, Gary Coleman. First and foremost, rest in peace, Gary Coleman. It was terrible to see this great actor's career be taken down and then ridiculed when he had to go get a regular job. I mean, before he passed, Gary did an interview in 2010 with The Insider, and things got very heated. One of those hosts started asking him questions about his ex-wife Susan Price, but Coleman did not take this well. He began yelling expletives at the mortified host as he immediately departed the interview. It must have been a very touchy subject, but this is also a reminder of why it's important to brief guests with the questions that they'll be asked. I mean, these curveballs from reporters rarely lead to anything good, and Gary's interview is kind of proof of that. In at number 5, Cara Delevingne. Let's just say her dry British humor was not really received by these happy-go-lucky morning news anchors at CBS Sacramento. I mean, at the start of the interview, she was asked some very dumb questions. I mean, for example, the film Paper Towns was based on a book, so they asked her if she had read the book, and then immediately after made a snide comment about her probably not having enough time to read. Now, Cara obviously takes offense to this, judging by her body language, but instead decides to flip it into a joke, saying that she didn't even read the script, just winged it.
No, I never read the book or the script, actually. I kind of winged it.
And the interviewers actually take this as factual for a moment before her laughing kind of cuts the tension. That's not even the most awkward part of this interview, though.
I think it probably is us. Well, then on that note...
We figured as much.
We'll let you go then. How about that? We'll let you go take a little nap, maybe get a Red Bull. How about that?
After one interviewer asked her why she isn't as excited as her other interviews, she remarks that it's very early and that she thought it was going well, so again, jokingly, she said, "It must be you." And the lady in the middle, oh my god, she sounded so bitter. "We'll let you take a little nap and have a Red Bull? How about that?" Yes. How about that level of professional journalism? Good morning, Sacramento. Although ever since this interview, we haven't really seen Cara in any more movies, and even the ones that we have seen her in, it was like, yeah, whatever. In at number 4, Robert Pattinson. When the Twilight series was at its peak, Rob had to do a ton of press to promote the film, and his agent made it expressly clear to every single interviewer not to mention his rumored relationship. People were already speculating that Pattinson was dating co-star Kristen Stewart, but they definitely wanted to keep things as private as possible. However, when he went on air with Ryan Seacrest, things went sideways. As soon as Seacrest started asking about his rumored relationship, Rob's agent gave him the cue to leave the interview. Now, this didn't exactly destroy his career, but it certainly put a bad light on the actor for being kind of so dodgy with questions. I mean, if he had have just stayed in the interview and just told Ryan that he didn't want to talk about it, I bet Ryan would have just moved on. I mean, Seacrest has been in that business for so long that he knows how to keep things professional. But I guess he missed the memo on not talking about the relationship thing.
What can you tell them about it?
I also just love that you can see his agent in the back giving the old wrap it up signal to Ryan, and he is definitely ignoring her. her. In at number 3, Jim Carrey. While at the New York Fashion Week in 2017, Jim Carrey made a rare appearance, and while walking down the red carpet, he did his best to avoid an interview with E! News. At first, he kind of tried to twirl around a few times and not really stand still, hoping that would work, but man, she was persistent. Carrey then says that he wanted to find the most meaningless event that he could go to, and that's how he ended up there. The interviewer tries to keep the integrity of the event high and claims that it's a celebration of icons, for which Jim says, icons don't exist. I don't believe in personalities. I don't believe you exist, but there is a wonderful fragrance in the air. Before departing from this awkward interview, he leaves her with this nugget of truth.
It's not our world.
None of this is real?
Nope.
It was a while before we saw Jim Carrey again after that, but we're sure he wants it that way. I mean, it probably made keeping the Sonic live-action film quiet a lot easier. In at number 2, Mel Gibson. While promoting his film Edge of Darkness in a 2010 interview with WGN-TV, Mel Gibson appeared like he really didn't want to be there. I mean, the best part was that he wasn't even physically there. He just was appearing via satellite because it was probably the fastest way to do this press run. Although, among all of the questions that annoyed the actor, it was when he dove into Gibson's drinking that kind of really set him off. The reporter got even more bold by asking him about his previous anti-Semitic remarks, to which Mel replied that was 4 years ago and he had already apologized for that. And the reporter, sensing that Mel was about to cuss him out on live air, he kind of shifted back to promoting the film. Good move. Although Mel Gibson thought that the interview had disconnected, which resulted in some very troubling remarks to air live.
Thanks a lot for joining us, Mel. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Last but certainly not least on our number 1 spot, Courtney Love. Courtney Love has been a mess forever. She does not handle interviews with any ounce of grace, and her crashing an interview with Madonna kind of proves my point. Back at the 1995 MTV VMAs, the interviewer was engaged in a discussion with Madonna when he notices Courtney Love yelling from down below. He then invites her onto the interview platform, even at the behest of Madonna, and things immediately turn to the worst case scenario. She starts drunkenly throwing small items at Madonna, and then she kneels down on the ground, and at that point Madonna just walks off the stage. Courtney then stays and hijacks the entire interview, going on more drunken rants and just being generally all over the place. I mean, literally all over the place. And it turns out the guy should have just listened to Madonna and had security keep Courtney back. Then we wouldn't have had this.